I walked into the kitchen this morning and felt my stomach clench for no good reason. Sometimes your gut knows what your mind hasn't caught up to yet. I'd woken up earlier than usual, because my youngest, Samantha, we call her Sam, had left her lunchbox on the counter. She's the kind who forgets small things, but she's bright and full of questions. Her older brother, Todd, used to call her the professor, back when they got along. I looked at that lunchbox for a second, thinking maybe I should let her handle the consequence of forgetting. But something tugged at me, like I should just pick the thing up and drive over to the school. So I did. On my way out, I told my wife, well, at the time, I still thought of her as my partner of 20-something years, that I'd be back in half an hour. She was in the living room folding laundry, or at least that's what I saw when I walked by. She gave me a nod, nothing more. We'd been a bit distant. Actually, more than a bit. But we were always the kind of couple who got by on routine. I guess that routine is what kept me from noticing a lot of signs. I put the lunchbox on the passenger seat. It had a cartoon character on it, something Sam liked at the start of the school year. I remember thinking she was a bit old for cartoons, but she insisted it was cool. So we bought it. Pulling out of the driveway, I felt the sky was too bright, like the sun was mocking me. It was a normal day. Plain, American small-town day. Houses lining up, a dog barking down the street, a garbage truck passing by. I even nodded at the neighbor who was getting his mail. It's the kind of day you forget 2 hours later, because nothing special happens. Except something did happen. Traffic was light. I parked by the side entrance of the school, near the faculty lot. I guess I arrived about 15 minutes before classes were due to start. Sam's homeroom was on the second floor, but I headed straight to the main office first to check in. They recognized me. I've been in and out for various parent-teacher events. They gave me a visitor pass, and I took the steps up. The hallway smelled like old books and cleaning fluid, like any school I've ever been in. Her classroom door was open just a crack. Normally, I would have just knocked, but something made me stop. I heard a sound, soft, but not exactly casual. I can't say what I expected. Maybe I thought Sam was crying. Maybe I thought I heard a chair scrape the floor. I'm not sure. But I pressed my hand to the door and opened it, slow and quiet. There they were. She was on her back on the teacher's desk, skirt bunched around her thighs. He was leaning over her, his hand somewhere it shouldn't have been. Her fingers were locked behind his neck. At first, I couldn't process who I was looking at. Her face was turned to the side, lips parted like she was catching her breath, and he looked like a man fully absorbed in what he was doing. Then she turned and saw me. Her eyes went wide, like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar. She didn't scream. She just stared, half in shock, half in guilt. And that was my wife. My partner for more than 2 decades. The mother of my kids. The woman who had breakfast with me just an hour ago and nodded like it was any other day. The man? He was the new teacher. Well, newish, been there a couple of years. I never paid him much attention. Some guy in his 40s, always a bit too friendly at open house, but I never suspected a thing. I stood there, hands still on the doorknob. It felt like time had slowed, but it was probably just a couple of seconds. He noticed me right after she did. They both froze. You'd think I would have yelled, or made some scene, or demanded an explanation. But I just felt blank. A cold blank, like everything inside me went numb in 1 second. I said, "Finish up. I'll wait in the car." It wasn't a line I prepared. It just came out, flat and emotionless. I shut the door as quietly as I'd opened it, walked back down the hall, left the visitor pass on the counter in the main office, and headed to my car. My hands were shaking by the time I turned the key in the ignition. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. But I just sat there, breathing, staring at that lunchbox on the passenger seat. For a second, I wanted to throw it out the window. Then I realized, Sam had nothing to do with this. Sam's in class somewhere else, right? A couple of minutes later, I saw my wife walk out of the building. She looked flustered. Hair messy, face pale. She opened the passenger door, grabbed the lunchbox, and asked in a shaky voice if I could just drive. I said nothing. I pulled out, and we rode in silence. The hum of the tires on the asphalt was the only sound. I didn't look at her. I didn't want to see whatever expression she had. When we got home, she started to speak, but I just walked past her and into the house. I set the keys on the kitchen counter. Then I went into the bedroom, grabbed my wallet and phone, and left again. I drove around for a while without any real direction. I ended up in the parking lot of a hardware store where we used to shop for tools. I just sat there, glancing over at the big sign, remembering how a few summers ago we built a terrace out back. She helped me stain the wood. She wasn't as handy, but she liked to be involved. We had laughs, cursing about the splinters and the heat. If you told me then that I'd see her with another man in a classroom, I would have called you insane. Eventually, I headed back home. Evening was coming on, and I needed to see what was real and what was not. I found her in the living room, on the couch, eyes red like she'd been crying for hours. She tried to talk, but I still couldn't form words. I remember looking at her hands. She was wringing them, twisting one ring around her finger. I recall feeling a distant sense of pity, or maybe disgust. I'm not sure. I just wanted to be out of that room. I left again. Didn't shout, didn't slam doors. Drove straight to his place. I knew where he lived because he'd once given us some form to sign for a school event, and the address was on it. I remember thinking it was a decent neighborhood, a couple blocks away from downtown. I parked half a block down, near a stop sign. My mind was half lost in a thick fog, but my body was on autopilot. I walked right up his driveway, peered in the window. Lights were on in the kitchen. I could see the edge of a table. I stood there, trying to figure out what I was going to do. Then I remembered the sledgehammer in my trunk. It was the same one I used to break up concrete when we built the terrace. 20-pound head, with a long steel handle. I popped the trunk, lifted it out, held it in my hands. It felt heavy but solid, like a part of me. I walked around to the back of the house. My mind wasn't calm, but I didn't feel insane either. I just felt driven by something I couldn't stop. I tested one of the windows. Locked. Then I saw another, a bit smaller, near the back door. I don't remember the exact angle, but I just swung. Glass shattered. It was a sharper sound than I expected. I reached in, unlatched it, crawled inside. My heart pounded in my ears, but I still didn't feel any fear. There were no words in my head about consequences, police, or anything. It was like my whole body was made of adrenaline and anger. He was standing there in the kitchen, phone in his hand, eyes wide. I didn't say a word. I lifted the sledgehammer and brought it down on the nearest cabinet. Wood splintered. I moved to the table, swung again. It cracked in half, chair legs snapped, plates fell and shattered on the floor. I heard him breathing ragged. He was in the corner, still clutching his phone. Another swing at the stove. Metal crumpled. Another at the fridge. The door caved in. Sparks flew from something in the back. I was smashing every inch of his kitchen, turning everything into rubble. I barely heard his voice when he tried to say something like, "Stop!" Or maybe he was telling me he'd call the cops. He never dialed. His finger hovered, but he didn't press the button. Then I turned and walked back out the same way I came in. I left him there with the wreckage of what used to be his kitchen. I didn't look back. Didn't run either. Just walked, hammer in hand, to my car, laid it in the trunk, and drove off. On the way home, I realized my hands were shaking so badly I could hardly grip the wheel. My breath was short, like I'd just sprinted a mile. A piece of me thought, "What the hell did you just do?" But another part of me felt a strange calm. Like I'd done exactly what I had to do, no matter how reckless, how irrational. That night I barely slept. I felt like my brain had turned into a static channel, and all I could see was the image of them in that classroom, her eyes going wide, and him leaning over her. That's how the day ended, or at least how it ended for me. I remember finally closing my eyes around 3 in the morning, feeling something wet on my cheeks, not sure if it was sweat or tears. I thought about Sam, about Todd, about the years we spent in this house. My wife was in the guest room. I guess she didn't dare come near me. It was the first night we'd slept in separate rooms under that roof. And the funny thing is, I didn't care. I just wanted to be left alone. That's how it started. The next day felt like I was walking through fog. I woke up and found the house quiet. No smell of coffee. No sound of footsteps. Just a note on the counter. Took the kids to school. We'll talk later. I stared at the words, noticing how messy her handwriting looked. Like she wrote it in a hurry. I balled it up and tossed it in the trash. I leaned on the counter, arms braced on either side, and stared at the sink. I waited for a rush of anger or sorrow, or something. But I just felt numb. Eventually, I forced myself to get dressed. I called work and told them I needed the day off, maybe more. My boss sounded concerned, but I cut him off. I didn't want to explain. Then I got in the car and started driving. I didn't know where else to go, so I ended up in a park, the one near the elementary school. It was still early, about 9. I walked to a bench and sat down, breathing in the cold air. My mind replayed the moment in the classroom over and over. Her face, his posture, the way either of them even screamed or panicked. They just looked stunned. Then I thought about the sledgehammer, the window, that poor kitchen. I wondered if the cops were looking for me, or if he just decided to let it go. I didn't know what he'd do. Maybe he was scared. Maybe he understood exactly why I did it, and somehow felt he had it coming. Maybe he was just as numb as me. After about an hour of sitting, I realized I needed to see Sam. I wanted to do something normal for her, to prove I was still her dad, still able to show up. So I stood and walked over to the school fence. They had recess around that time. I saw her off in the distance with a couple of friends, running and laughing. She had that carefree bounce in her step. My heart ached seeing her smile. She had no idea what was going on. I stayed behind the chain-link fence, watched for a minute or two, then left before anyone could notice me. By the time I got home, my wife was back. She sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped together like she was praying. When I walked in, she raised her eyes to mine and tried to speak. I put a hand up. "Not now," I said. "Not yet." She nodded, tears welling up. I could see she was hurting, but I didn't feel sorry for her. I felt detached, like a spectator. I went to the living room, turned on the TV. Some sports channel. I wasn't paying attention. Hours passed. Todd came home from high school around 3. He shouted a hello, I think. I heard him walk into the kitchen, talk to his mom in low tones. Then the front door slammed. Maybe he went out again. He's 18, has his own car. Sam came home around 4, all excited about something that happened in class. I heard her voice in the hallway. That used to warm my heart, but now it just reminded me of what I saw. My wife tried to keep her quiet, telling her, "Daddy's resting," or something like that. I felt guilty all of a sudden, guilty for wanting to shut the world out. That evening, we finally talked, or tried to. She came into the living room, stood by the TV, and said, "We need to face this." Her voice was shaky, but determined. I clicked the TV off. We sat on opposite ends of the couch. For a minute, neither of us said a word. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. She opened her mouth first. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know that's not enough." I stared at her. I didn't want an apology. I wanted an explanation. "It just happened," she continued, stumbling over words. "A year ago, it was a mistake." She choked up. I felt a spark of anger. A year? This was going on for a year. I asked her why, how, when. My questions came out in short bursts. She tried to answer, but everything she said sounded hollow. I was lonely. We drifted. He was there. I could barely look at her. I wanted to say something about how you don't screw around in your child's classroom, but the words got stuck in my throat. I ended up just shaking my head. We talked in circles for maybe half an hour. Then she said, "I'll go stay somewhere else if you want." I turned and looked at her. "No," I said. "I'm not leaving my house, and I'm not forcing the kids to move. You do what you want." She nodded, tears running down her face. Then she quietly went upstairs, and I sat there in the dark. I slept in Todd's old room that night. He sometimes stays over at a friend's if they're working on a project. The bed was too short for me, but it felt better than being near her. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioner. I told myself I'd figure out what to do in the morning. But the next day, something else landed in my lap. The principal from the school called. He asked if I could come in. I said I'd rather not. He insisted. So I went. When I got there, he asked me to step into his office. He was a serious man, mid-50s, tie always perfectly straight. He looked uncomfortable, like he was about to deliver a nasty verdict. He told me there had been an incident. He wouldn't go into detail, but it was obvious he knew. I thought he mentioned that teacher, or the broken window at the teacher's house. Instead, he started talking about a conflict of interest, about staff not revealing personal relationships. "We're reviewing the situation," he said, "and we want to assure you that your daughter's well-being is our priority." I stared at him, not sure if he expected me to comment. My ears buzzed with anger. "I just want my daughter to be safe," I said. He nodded, and that was it. I left the office feeling more confused than before. I drove home, half wishing the cops would pull me over, half wishing they wouldn't. No one called about the break-in. Not yet. When I got back, the house was empty again. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, the same table where we used to have family dinners. My fists tightened up. My mind kept drifting to that hammer, how it felt to destroy something. The pure release of rage. But then shame flooded in. Who does that? I never thought I was that kind of man. Late that afternoon, I finally saw him, by accident. I was at the grocery store picking up milk and a frozen pizza for Todd. I saw that teacher near the produce section. My chest clenched. He saw me too. His eye was bruised, or maybe it was just the lighting. I noticed a scratch on his cheek, probably from flying debris or glass. He looked me in the eye for half a second, then he turned and practically ran to another aisle. I realized he must be terrified I'd confront him there. I just stood where I was. The anger that had boiled up in me before felt like a simmer now. I thought, "You deserve every broken cabinet in that kitchen." I left without buying anything. Just walked out, got in my car, and sat there, gripping the steering wheel. I tried to calm myself by breathing deeply, counting to 10. But my thoughts spun. What else was she hiding? How long had I been a fool in my own house? By the time I got home, I was shaking all over again. That night, I slept maybe 2 hours. I kept imagining them together, the secrets they'd shared. Did my kids suspect anything? Did Sam ever pick up on weird vibes between her mom and that teacher? I tried to blot out the images, but they replayed like a broken tape loop. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and went to the kitchen. I stared at the calendar pinned to the fridge. School fundraiser, dentist appointment, Todd's game. A normal life on the surface, but rotting underneath. I closed my eyes and felt more alone than I'd ever been. A week passed like that. We didn't yell or have big showdowns. We drifted around the house like strangers. I made breakfast for myself. She made breakfast for the kids. Todd stayed in his room most evenings, playing something on his computer or scrolling on his phone. Sam, being younger, sensed the tension but didn't understand it. She asked questions like, "Are you and Mom fighting?" And I'd tell her, "We're just sorting things out." Her face showed confusion. She wasn't used to seeing me so distant. On the 7th day after I found them, my wife, let's just call her that for now, though it didn't feel true anymore, came into the living room where I was sitting, flipping through channels. She turned off the TV. I was about to protest, but something in her expression stopped me. She said, "We need to talk." I stared at her. She sat down across from me, hands in her lap, eyes fixed on the carpet. Then she said quietly, "He's Sam's father." I didn't react at first. The words didn't make sense. I stared at her, waiting for a punchline. She looked back, tears trembling on her lashes. "He's Sam's father," she repeated. The room fell silent. The only sound was my heartbeat slamming in my ears. After what felt like a century, I managed to ask, "What do you mean?" My mouth felt dry. She took a shaky breath. 10 years ago, we had an affair. It was short, I ended it. I swore I'd never see him again. But I got pregnant. I knew the timing. I knew she wasn't yours. But I also knew you were a good dad to Todd, and I just couldn't bear to blow up our family. I figured if Sam was yours in every other way, maybe it wouldn't matter. She paused, pressing her lips together. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything." I stood up. I felt blood rush to my head. I had to lean on the arm of the couch to keep from falling. 10 years. A decade of birthdays, Christmas mornings, bedtime stories. All that time, I believed I was Sam's father. And she never told me. I looked at her. She looked so small in that moment, like she was bracing for some terrible storm. My voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. "You're serious?" She nodded, tears now rolling down her cheeks. I wanted to scream, but no words came. I wanted to punch a hole in the wall, but my arms stayed limp at my sides. Instead, I just walked out. I grabbed my jacket, keys, wallet, and got in the car. I drove to my brother's place, about 30 miles away. He was home, watching some game on TV. He opened the door, saw my face, and said nothing. I stepped inside, sat on his couch, and stared at the wall for a long time. He asked me if I needed a beer or something stronger. I shook my head at first, then changed my mind and nodded. He gave me a beer. We sat there in silence. I ended up staying at his house for 3 months. No one expected that. He let me crash in his guest room. I didn't talk much. He's my younger brother by 4 years, single guy, works construction. We used to be close, but life got in the way. Now he was my lifeline. I'd spend hours sitting on his back porch, staring at the sky, replaying every moment of Sam's childhood in my head. The time she fell off her bike and I carried her home, the time she made a silly Father's Day card, the time she got sick in the middle of the night, and I held her hand until she fell asleep. Was all of that a lie? Or was it real, just overshadowed by the secret? My wife, ex-wife in spirit, if not on paper, tried to call me. I stopped answering after the first 2 calls. Todd texted me, asked me where I was, said he was worried. I just told him I needed space. Sam tried to FaceTime me once. I let it ring. I couldn't face her. Because even though she didn't do anything wrong, I felt betrayed in a way I couldn't put into words. I'd see her face and think, "You're not really mine." And that thought nearly destroyed me. 3 months. I didn't go to work. I took some paid leave at first, then just gave them some excuse about a family emergency. My boss is a decent guy. He gave me room. My brother let me mope around, occasionally driving me to pick up groceries or run errands. He never pried. He just said, "Stay as long as you need." Sometimes, we'd sit on his porch at night with a couple of beers, him quietly fiddling with his phone, me lost in my own head. Sometimes he'd say something about a job he was working on, and I'd nod. It was like being in suspended animation. Eventually, I realized I had to see Sam. Not for me, but for her. She was only 9. She deserved some explanation. But I was too chicken to do it face to face, so I started driving by her school, watching from a distance at recess, just to see if she was all right. I'd see her on the swings, or walking around with friends, that same curiosity on her face. A few times I almost got out of the car to call her over. But I was afraid. I didn't know how to handle the truth. One day, I decided enough was enough. I went to a drugstore and bought a DNA test kit. The kind people buy when they have doubts. It felt surreal standing in that aisle. The bright fluorescent lights, the background music. A typical Tuesday afternoon. I paid at the checkout, tossed it in a bag, and drove to the school again. I waited until Sam left, until I spotted her walking to the car with her mom. Then I followed them at a distance. When they got home, I parked a block away. Eventually, they went inside. I crept up to the side of the house, where the bathroom window was cracked open. On the sink was Sam's pink hairbrush. She'd left it there. My heart pounded. This was insane, but I couldn't let it stop me. I carefully reached in, snagged the brush, and disappeared back to my car. Back at my brother's place, I sat at the kitchen table with the brush and the DNA kit. I took a hair sample from the brush, sealed it up. It all felt so twisted, so wrong, but I needed the truth. I mailed it off the next day. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. I started drinking more, just beer at first, then whiskey. My brother gave me looks but didn't say much. He didn't want to push me. I'd snap at him sometimes, and he'd just walk away, shaking his head. When the results came back, I was alone in the house. My brother was at work. I opened the envelope and read the lines. Probability of paternity 0%. My hand shook so hard I nearly tore the paper. But I didn't cry. I just felt everything inside me go hollow. 10 years of fatherhood gone in one line of text. I set the paper down and stared at it. After a while, I pulled out my phone and called a lawyer. I didn't want revenge on her. But I did want accountability. And I wanted to get that bastard of a teacher out of the school, away from my daughter. Yes, she's still my daughter in every sense that matters, except blood. I filed a suit against him. Civil suit for emotional distress, for misconduct, for failing to disclose a conflict of interest with a student he was related to. My lawyer said we might have a case, though it was tricky. The main goal, though, was to put pressure on him professionally, to get him fired. And I wanted him to feel something, some consequence for tearing my life apart. Not long after that, I found out he was let go. The school board acted swiftly once the details came to light. Apparently, they had policies about personal relationships that compromised the educational environment. Good. I didn't feel sorry for him. I hoped he ended up somewhere far away, digging ditches. Part of me knew that was petty. But I couldn't help it. My anger was still raw. I also filed a complaint alleging that he manipulated the hiring process, not disclosing that he had a child in the district. He might have used a different address or withheld information. My lawyer said we'd see where that leads. At that point, I didn't care if it cost me money. I just wanted to take some stand. Even if it was messy, even if it wouldn't fix everything. Weeks went by. The legal gears turned. My wife sent me messages, some angry, some pleading. I deleted most of them without reading. Todd texted occasionally, asked if I was okay. He was old enough to sense something deeper was happening, but I never gave him details. Sam, she was the reason I finally decided to talk again. I arranged a meeting in a neutral spot, my lawyer's office. I told my wife and Sam to come. Todd refused to show up. He was mad at me for shutting him out. That stung, but I couldn't change it right then. So it was just me, my wife, Sam, and the lawyer. We sat around a small conference table. Sam looked scared, eyes darting from me to her mom. My wife looked tense, fingers digging into the edge of her chair. The lawyer opened by saying we were here to talk through a settlement, but I raised my hand to stop him. I need to talk to my daughter first, I said. He nodded and left the room. My wife started to protest, but I gave her a look that made her go silent. Sam's voice was small. Dad, why are we here? Mom said something about legal stuff. The word Dad hit me hard. I took a breath. Sweetie, I said, I need to tell you something. Something that's going to hurt. My wife started crying softly, and Sam turned to her, then back to me. You know how families are built on trust, right? I asked. She nodded. I struggled for words. Sometimes, grown-ups make mistakes. And sometimes, those mistakes affect their kids in ways they never imagined. Sam didn't move. She just looked at me with those big eyes, the ones that used to light up when she showed me her drawings. I forced myself to continue. I found out that the man who taught at your school, the one who was fired, he's actually your biological father. Her eyes went wide. She shifted her gaze to her mom, who was sobbing now. Sam's lips trembled. What do you mean? She asked, voice shaking. I swallowed. It means that even though I've been here your whole life, the blood that runs in your veins is partly his. Sam squeezed her hands together. She looked at her mom. Is that true? My wife nodded, tears streaming down. Everything was quiet. Then Sam whispered, So you're not my dad? I felt my chest tighten. I'm not the man who gave you life. But I've been here for you since the day you were born. I've fed you, held you, taught you how to ride a bike. I'm the one who's always checked for monsters under your bed. I'm still the man who loves you. I paused, feeling tears burn in my eyes. That doesn't change. Sam stared at me, her face growing red. She looked betrayed. But you're not really my dad, she said, voice cracking. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words stuck in my throat. Finally, she stood up, tears in her eyes. She glanced at her mom, then at me, and ran out of the room. My wife tried to follow, but I stopped her. Let her breathe, I said. She looked like she wanted to argue, but then she sank back into her chair. A moment later, my lawyer peeked in, saw the tension, and decided to give us space. We sat there in heavy silence until I finally stood up and walked out. In the hallway, I saw Sam leaning against the wall, arms folded. She was crying quietly. I approached her, but she turned away. I didn't push it. I just stood nearby. Eventually, she said, Why did you tell me? I answered, Because I couldn't lie anymore. You deserve the truth. She wiped her eyes. Everything's ruined now. I couldn't argue with that. Later, my wife took Sam home, and I stayed behind to deal with the legal stuff. The formal complaint. The lawsuit. The potential settlement. My lawyer said the teacher's attorney was offering a settlement to avoid going to trial. Money wasn't my main concern, but the apology letter and the official record of his misconduct mattered to me. I wanted something in writing that said he crossed the line. That he broke rules. That he wasn't fit to teach. My lawyer told me we could push for a public statement from the school board. I told him to do it. Days bled into weeks. The teacher's side tried to argue that the affair was consensual, unrelated to his job performance, that the paternity issue was personal. But the deception about Sam being in his class was a problem. Plus, I had letters from the principal and staff attesting that he never disclosed the relationship. Long story short, his license was suspended, and he was barred from working in the district again. I felt a hollow satisfaction. It didn't fix my life, but at least it made me feel like I'd stood up for myself. Meanwhile, Sam was distant. She stayed in her room more, or she'd leave the house with friends. When I came over to see Todd, she barely looked at me. That hurt more than anything else. She stopped calling me Dad. She'd say, Hey, or just wait for me to speak first. I tried not to show how much that stung. Inside, I was bleeding. Eventually, I decided to move out permanently. I told my wife I'd come by for my things when she and the kids were out. She tried to talk me out of it, not because she wanted me back, she knew that was impossible, but because she said Sam needed stability. I told her I wasn't stability anymore. You destroyed that, I said. My voice was low, not angry, just a plain statement of fact. She nodded, looking broken. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. One weekend I drove my truck over, loaded a few suitcases and boxes. I didn't take a lot, just clothes, some personal items. The bigger furniture was mostly ours together, so I left it. I stood in the living room for a moment before I left, looking at the walls, the family photos, Sam's first day of kindergarten, Todd's baseball trophy, Christmas gatherings. I grabbed a couple of the pictures and left the rest. As I carried the boxes out, I caught my wife standing by the staircase, arms crossed, tears in her eyes. She didn't say a word, and neither did I. I found a small one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It's not fancy, but it's mine. On the first night there, I stood in the kitchen with the lights off, just letting the quiet settle in. I'd never lived alone in my adult life. Before marriage, I had roommates. Then I had my wife, our kids. I felt hollow and old, like I'd wasted the best years of my life on a lie. But I also felt a strange sense of independence. This was a chance to start over, maybe. Even though I didn't have much hope, I told myself it couldn't get worse. I tried to reach out to Todd, left him a voicemail. He responded with a text saying he was mad but still wanted to see me sometimes. We met for a burger. He asked me if the rumors at school were true, if Sam was biologically someone else's kid. I told him the truth. He said he felt betrayed by Mom. He also felt guilty for Sam. I told him none of this was Sam's fault. He sighed, nodded, but didn't look convinced. By the time we finished our burgers, I think we both realized we had no answers, just the same sadness. I avoided Sam for a while, not because I didn't love her, but because every time I saw her, we both seemed to get more upset. She saw me as the man who exposed everything, who dragged her real father into the spotlight, got him fired, turned her life upside down. I saw her as the living reminder that none of my family was what I thought it was. It was a terrible state to be in. But that's how things stood. At night in my apartment, I started drinking more. A couple of beers, maybe a shot of whiskey. I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror, stare at my reflection, see the lines on my face that looked deeper. I felt older, worn out. I kept hearing my own voice in my head saying, "Finish up. I'll wait in the car." That's what I said the day I caught them. It haunted me, like a piece of me froze in that moment and never thawed. Some weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from the school district. Inside was a copy of the official statement about the teacher's termination. They cited violations of professional conduct, conflicts of interest, undisclosed familial ties to a student, and so on. It was everything I'd wanted, spelled out in black and white. I felt a weird mixture of relief and emptiness. It didn't change my life, but it confirmed he wasn't going to teach there anymore. Around that same time, my lawyer said the settlement was finalized. A small monetary sum, enough to cover legal fees and a bit more. And a clause that he'd never contact Sam unless she initiated it, at least until she was 18. I could have pushed for more, but I didn't see the point. I wanted distance. I wanted him out of our lives. I started therapy, just one-on-one sessions with a counselor who specialized in family trauma. I felt stupid talking to a stranger, but after a while, I realized I needed it. I had nightmares, flashbacks. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, half thinking I was still in that classroom door, or swinging that sledgehammer in his kitchen. The counselor asked me to describe my feelings in detail. I told him I was angry, betrayed, ashamed. But mostly I felt like a fool. He said, "That's normal. You were deceived for a long time. It'll take time to heal." I told him, "I don't want to heal, I just want to not feel crazy." He nodded and said that was a start. I tried to see Sam again. I texted her phone. She had a little flip phone for emergencies. I wrote, "I miss you. Can we talk?" She took a day or so to reply. Then she wrote back, "Maybe." We agreed to meet at the park near her school one afternoon. I got there early, sat on a bench. She showed up, hair in a ponytail, wearing her backpack. She looked so small, yet so grown up with that sadness in her eyes. I patted the bench next to me. She sat, left a few inches between us. For a while, we just watched the ducks in the pond. Then I said, "I'm sorry." She asked, "For what?" I told her, "For everything that's happened. For the confusion, for the hurt. I wanted you to know the truth, but I never wanted to hurt you." She was quiet, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. Finally, she asked, Why couldn't Mom just tell me a long time ago? I didn't have an answer that made sense. Adults think they're protecting their kids by hiding stuff. Sometimes it just makes it worse, I said. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. So you're not my real dad? She asked again. I sighed. I'm the dad who raised you, who loves you. But biologically, no. She bit her lip. Okay. We sat there a bit longer. I wanted to hug her, but I wasn't sure she'd let me. Finally, she leaned her head against my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world. I put my arm around her, gently, and felt her tremble. We didn't say anything else. After a while, she stood up, looked at me with watery eyes, and mumbled something about going home. I nodded, let her walk away. I stayed on that bench a long time, watching her figure disappear down the path. Life moved on day by day. I officially filed for separation, but I didn't finalize the divorce yet. Maybe part of me just couldn't bring myself to sign that last piece of paper. My wife tried to reach out, wanted to talk about the future, about where we stand. I told her I have no interest in reconciliation. She cried, told me she'd never forgive herself. I didn't offer her comfort. I just said goodbye. Work took me back. I threw myself into projects, working late, volunteering for extra shifts. My coworkers sensed I was different, but they didn't pry. One day my boss asked, "You all right, man?" I just nodded. Didn't explain. I'm sure rumors floated around, but no one confronted me. Sometimes that's the good thing about working in a place where everyone's got their own problems. As for Todd, he visits me now and then. We watch a game or grab a pizza. He's got his own life, close to graduation, maybe heading to a local college. He doesn't bring up what happened unless I do, and I usually don't. He just gives me updates on Sam, how she's doing in middle school, that she's still quiet. I nod. I figure with time, maybe she'll open up more. Or maybe she won't. I can't force it. Sometimes at night, I dream I'm back in that teacher's house, raising the hammer over my head. In the dream, I can't stop swinging, and the house collapses around me, brick by brick. I wake up sweating, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. I stare at the ceiling and remind myself I'm in my own apartment. The walls are mine, the floor is mine. No secrets. No lies. Just me, alone with my regrets. I won't say I've won anything. I didn't. My marriage is gone. My relationship with Sam is damaged. That teacher, her biological father, got fired, but that doesn't erase what happened. And I still carry the memory of walking into that classroom and seeing them on the desk. That's the kind of thing you can't unsee. But I also know I didn't roll over and play dead. I confronted it. Maybe I did it in a crazy way. Smashing a man's kitchen is definitely not normal. But I had to do something. I had to break something, or I was going to break myself. Now I wake up in this small apartment, make my own coffee, stare at the empty table. It's quiet. Sometimes too quiet. I've got photos of Todd and Sam on a shelf by the TV. Even if Sam might not call me Dad for a while, if ever, I still see her as my daughter. Blood or not, she's the kid I raised. Maybe one day she'll understand that. Or maybe not. Either way, I did what I did. I can live with the consequences. If there's any peace in all this, it's in knowing I told the truth at the end. I forced the truth to come out. No more secrets. No more illusions. It's a grim kind of peace, but it's there. And sometimes, late at night, when I get up to grab a drink of water, I look around my small kitchen. The counters are intact, the cupboards are mine, and nobody's lying in that space. I can't say I'm happy, but at least I know where I stand. And that has to count for something. When I think back to the day I found them, sometimes I wish I'd reacted differently. Maybe shouted. Maybe demanded answers right there. But no, what I did was me, stripped of all politeness and hesitation. I said, "Finish up. I'll wait in the car." That line still sounds so hollow, so cold. But it was what came out when my world dropped out from under me. now I live with it. I'm not sure where life goes from here. I might sell the house, she's still living there with Todd and Sam, but the mortgage has my name on it, so eventually we'll sort that out. I might move to a different state. Or maybe I'll stick around just so I can see Sam more often. Part of me wants to run, but another part can't bear the idea of leaving her behind. I guess I'll figure it out day by day. I'm 50 plus now, not a young man, but not dead yet. I still have time to build something new, even if the foundation of my old life is rubble. And that's the story, neighbor. I wish it was simpler. I wish I could tie it up in a neat bow and say, that's that. But life doesn't work that way. All I can say is, this is how it happened. A man sees his wife with another man. He breaks that man's kitchen. He finds out his daughter isn't his by blood. He sues, he leaves, he tries to pick up the pieces. That's it. That's me, that's my life right now. I'm just trying to breathe and not let the bitterness eat me alive. And maybe, eventually, find a way to forgive myself for not knowing sooner, and forgive her for keeping it hidden. But that part's a work in progress. I guess that's all there is to say.